Hello, Pod Smashers of the Internet, and welcome to another episode of
80-bit Pod Smash.
80-bit Pod Smash, where gaming goes to grab a beer. I didn't know it was so quick. Usually you sing and it's like a whole thing, and you're just like, 80-bit Pod Smash. I was like, wait.
Tink your glass, or crack your can, whatever.
Whatever we gotta do.
Whatever you gotta do.
We are your
now
hosts.
That we're derailed. Yeah, Penguin and Termite, I'm Penguin.
I am Termite, and we are a weekly video game podcast smashing together ideas that you care about with video games.
That's right, and tonight we are talking about the idea of hype, whether or not we think it's a good thing for the industry. And speaking of hype, this is the first proper episode of the year 2022, and the last episode we're recording from 2021. So we're still in 2021 right now. So it's like a weird, the hype episode,
time
of
course.
Travel. It's going to be the hypest hype episode, so get hyped, I guess. Anyways, we'll talk about hype and what it is and its history in this culture, in this subculture of video gaming. And then we'll break it down a little bit, but we'll get to all that and more in our main topic. But for right now, in this moment, we are where gaming goes to grab a beer, so we like to talk about what beers we're drinking. Termite, what you drinking tonight?
I am drinking a Clown Shoes Brewery. Is the name of the brewery? Is it brewing company? Is it whatever? It's Clown Shoes, and the name of the beer is The Exorcist. It is a dry hopped stout. You've had it?
I mean, what a great name for a beer. I mean, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's a dry hopped stout.
Wow.
So it is a stout with hops, and it is wonderful.
I think I've had a dry hop stout before, but I don't
remember
anything about it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it does have the feel and the texture and the look of a stout, but it has those hops in there. So you got that finish kind of tanginess on the side that you get with a stout, but initially it's all hops, and it's scents and how it smells. That's an I can't spell SCENT scents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, got it.
Mm-hmm. This is good. I like it. It's got about 8% alcohol, so it's not super boozy, and it's pretty lightweight too. It's not very thick or heavy, so it's good.
I bet you they call it the Exorcist because it'll make you puke.
If
you drink too many, but if you drink too many,
I guess so. That's with any beer.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the never mind. Forget it. I'm probably gonna cut this. I'm drinking. This one has been sitting in my fridge for a while, and I've been putting it off because I've had so many Christmas beers and fall and trying to get through the sort of remaining fall and sort of seasonal beers that I've had. So finally I get to I had an excuse to crack this guy open, and this is maybe my first Imperial Stout of the year. I'm thinking about it now that I'm thinking about it. And it is a Narwhal from Sierra Nevada. It's the 2021 Narwhal. And
love
it. Just an Imperial Stout. It's not my favorite Imperial Stout in the world, but it's like a From Software game. Any Imperial Stout is better than most other beers. It's just not my favorite. Basically, this beer is Dark Souls 2, from my understanding.
Well, I don't want to try it because it's too hard.
Yeah, I believe it. Yeah, no, this is good. It's good. I'm going to read the back real quick. Inspired by the mysterious creature that dwells in the deepest Arctic seas, Narwhal Imperial Stout is midnight black and bold, with notes of baker's cocoa, dark roasted coffee. The massive Imperial Stout is incredibly complex and explores the deepest depths of malt flavor. Yeah, it's an Imperial Stout. It's boozy. It's deep, and it's got that cocoa-y kind of taste to it. Baker's chocolate. They said Baker's chocolate, and it definitely tastes like Baker's chocolate.
Oh, Love it. Nice. Do you know that there's a barrel-aged version of that?
Oh,
that exists. I've never had it.
Into my mouth. Inject it. I want to put that in a camel pack and just drink it right out of the straw.
Nice.
Well, anything you want to discuss before we jump into our segments?
Yeah, I was just noticing as I was preparing for this show, my son was playing Sonic 2 on the Nintendo Switch, because you can do that now with the Sega Genesis games added through the expansion pack. And so I was just watching it, and he would try to get my attention to, Daddy, check this out. And Dad, look at Sonic. And he's standing on the edge, admiring the animation that Sonic makes when he's standing really close to the edge of a cliff, where he leans forward like he's gonna fall, but he's trying to keep his balance, so he's flailing his arms around, and he was just enamored by that. And so he was messing with it. He was trying to test the limits of what triggers that animation, how close to the edge. He'd be like, Daddy, look. And I'm like, what? He's literally standing on the edge, but he's not doing the thing. And I was like, you're right, he's not. And then he hit the button again to make him go over by 1 pixel, and then boom, he was doing the animation again. And I was just like, what he is doing brought me right back to the time when I was his age, when I used to care about meaningless, silly little things about video games and how I would experience them as a child versus now. And how, like, that type of stuff is usually done by reviewers on purpose to, like, test some of the technical limitations or the mechanics of a game. But kids just want to explore that.
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
like,
Just
as adults,
the sense of discovery. Yeah, it's awesome.
it's amazing to have that, like, brought back to my memory again, because, like, I'm totally out of that now. When I buy a game and I play through it, it's like, it's a story game. I want the trophies. I got to make progress. I'm going through the game, and it's like, I don't care at all. Like, right now I'm playing Resident Evil 8, and there's probably a lot of cool little animations and things that you can do. Maybe there's some physics based interactions in the environment where you can kick over things or shatter stuff, or like maybe you shoot certain things and it reacts a certain way. But I don't care about any of that, because I just want to play the game and get the story and, like, experience what the game is presenting me with.
You want the game at a macro level. You're not so and you'll go appreciate it later when you read, like, articles that are like, did you know these 5 secrets in Resident Evil, these 5 Easter eggs and stuff like that?
Yeah, you go back and you're like, oh, sweet, yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, no, but it's definitely.
I remember, really quick before you jump in, the last example I have of me doing this, I guess in my own memory, is Metal Gear Solid 2. There was a demo disc that had come with Zone of the Enders on PS2, and I remember, because it was just one level where you played Solid Snake on a tanker, but I was so excited about Metal Gear Solid 2 that I wanted more than just a small demo, so I would play through it over and over again, experimenting with how you can interact with everything in the environment. Do the ketchup bottles, like, spray ketchup when you knock them over? Can you shoot the crates of oranges and they fall out and the oranges go everywhere? Like, all this weird stuff. And I just remember that, and my kid brought me right back to that memory. It was nice. So
yeah,
sorry,
I
go
feel
ahead.
like no, go ahead. That's great. I mean, there's a couple of thoughts I have immediately listened to that. Number one, I do think it's kind of a personality thing. I do think there are people out there who still get that kind of magic, right, from those little details, right? There are some people that pay attention to the big details. You and I are big details people, totally. And there are some people, though, out there who literally really do just get a lot of joy out of the little details, even as fully grown adults. So I don't think it's a thing that's exclusive to children. I do think it's in part at least a personality thing. And maybe some kids, maybe Sam will grow out of it, or maybe it's, you're getting a glimpse into, like, the kind of person and the kind of gamer he'll be. But I also think that, like, there's, I guess what I would encourage anybody who's like, oh man, like, I have the same experience. I used to do that, and I don't do that anymore. I've lost my sense of childlike wonder. But, like, I think that all of us still have something, some way that we relate to and interact with video games that, like, would be analogous to what a child would do. So, or like that, like, that give us that sense of, like, carefree wonder that kids experience just because they're kids, but we have, like, clung on, I think, to this little nuggets. Does it make sense? So, like, for me, I think it would be like things like staying up late or playing with friends on the couch, or like going to a midnight, Lord knows I can't even do that anymore, but like going to a midnight release of something, you know what I mean? Like, gets that sort of like, wow, this is a special event. It's like, maybe it's inconveniencing for me as an adult. Maybe my more rational adult brain would be like, oh my gosh, why am I, making this harder on myself when I could just download it, right? Like a digital copy or whatever, right? But like, there's the child in me that's like, but no, this is special, and I want to make it feel special. I feel like everyone has sort of like something they bring from their, like, childhood gaming experiences into now their adulthood gaming experiences. And for some people, it might be that like just test the details just to see what they have or haven't coded, and took time to like make it immersive, like your son does. But some people have may have different kind of things they bring to it. That makes sense.
Yeah it kind of like scales up with you and changes its appearance, but it's really the same root of like childlike wonder experience that you get. And now I actually want to do a full episode about it, but there's an idea in video games where it's like that awe moment. Like, we experience that as adults differently than kids do. But for us, it's Link running to the top of the hill in Breath of the Wild, and you hear the opening sequence. Did we do an
episode on that? I think we did do an episode on like take your breath away moments. But Carrie, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just thought
it's just like that was an example, I think, of what you were talking about, where like as adults we just have it differently, and how we want to get, we can experience a game differently because we perceive the world differently. Have world life experience behind, like, we know how the world is supposed to work, and like physics and science and things in the world like shape our actual real life worldview, and then we bring that to a video game where like things are challenged or different, and we're not as taken aback or surprised as a child might be, because they don't know as much as they're forming themselves I don't know. It's a weird kind of
you're right.
philosophical discussion about like
there's a
we're
trade-off.
still experiencing it. Yeah,
absolutely. There is a trade-off though, because now we have like a much more sophisticated understanding of what is. We can, Sam could play Sonic and be like, "Wow, I love this game because he has the cool, funny animations when he runs close to, or when he stands on the edge." But like he probably doesn't appreciate like Sonic 2 for the reason the history and like it coming out, it's way ahead of its time, and it's just right like all of the like really quality, like he doesn't have that view of it, and we do, because we have sort of we are educated, we're experienced, we grew up with it, we get all the meta knowledge that's brought to the table, and obviously that's a blessing and a curse, because sometimes it's hard to actually like appreciate games because we're critically analyzing them, even the good ones. But it definitely it comes with the fact that like we have a deeper understanding of it. So I was gonna say the last game that I do feel like I had that childlike wonder of just sort of like going in and experimenting and playing and seeing what I could do was definitely Breath of the Wild. Like there's definitely like the game encourages that too, where it's like, oh, I wonder if I can do this to get this effect. Oh, yay, delight when it works the way I wanted it to. Now I'm going to go share that with all my friends. So, yeah, definitely.
And it's cool because like it's built into making progress too. So it's like that's where you said it's the game encourages you to do it. It's like how many encounters do you have and what different ways can you get this done? But you're still accomplishing stuff. You're still making progress. And so as adults, we also have busy lives, and you and I are married. We have kids and jobs.
Stresses. We come to the table wanting to be efficient because we only have a limited time to do so.
Where that's the part I think that I missed the most watching my son play, is like to have the time to know that everything in the house is taken care of. My food is taken care of. My life, I'm good. I don't have to worry about clothes and laundry and cleaning and dinner and like everything about the right. Yeah, exactly. At that level, it's true. And then like even you don't have to worry about who's going to get you to school in the morning. You don't have to worry about like anything. You have all of that covered. The administrative tasks, the tabs open, as I call it, the stuff that my wife and I are taking on for them. Because they're children. They can't do it. But they have the freedom to just be and explore and learn. And I think that is what, to me, I'm the most envious of. It's like, I just want to sit down and have like a pocket of time like that.
Gavin keeps telling me he really is fascinated by my laptop right now. And partially because it's one of those forbidden fruit things, right? Like I tell him like, no, that's Stetta's work laptop. You literally can't touch it. Like I do not want you to mess this thing up because like I'd have to replace it if you did. And so now he's like even more fascinated by it. But the what he says
naturally
when he thinks about the laptop, when he sees the laptop, what he says is, I want to work hard, make money, because that's what my wife would tell him. That's what Macy would tell him when she would be explaining what I'm doing. Because all he'd see is me at the computer, right? Thinking I'm playing a game or something. It's like, no, Dad is working hard and making money. And so he goes, I want to work hard, make money. And I'm like, no, you don't, child. No, you don't. Just resist that as long as you can.
No, he just wants to play on your laptop and do what you do.
That's exactly what he wants to do. All right, let's move on to not indoctrinating our children to the evils of late-stage capitalism. That may not be our favorite thing, but
doing this podcast is our favorite thing.
Doing this podcast is our favorite thing.
Favorite things, a segment of our show where we discuss something that we're digging this week. Something that's not related to the podcast at all, really. It's just something in our lives that we like.
Sweet.
Deep or meaningful, or shallow. It doesn't matter.
Cool. What's your favorite thing this week?
I upgraded my phone, which happens every 3 to 4 years of my life. So actually a little bit more frequent than video game consoles. So, but it's still like magic. Every time I get a new phone, I'm like, this is amazing. And this time I had a different little experience. So it's my favorite thing. I got a Pixel 6 Pro. Talking about hype, right? I totally bought into the Pixel hype. I had a Pixel 3. I've stayed in the Google infrastructure ever since the Pixels came out. I like first-party hardware. I like those types of deals. So I know you can get Samsung phones, you can get OnePlus phones, and Motorola, et cetera, LG. They all made phones. And I've always like honed in on, I want the thing from Google, because you get the updates faster, you get direct things from the makers of the hardware, and it just works better in my mind. That can all be argued, and I totally understand those arguments. I am not like dying on my sword over this Pixel 6. But what I did happen to have experience of, the phone, because the updated hardware is now very fluid, and it has a 120 hertz screen, which is one of the appealing things about it, which a lot of other phones do too. So this is just me experiencing this for the first time. And so as I bounce around the phone, switching between apps, pagination, like scrolling around, doing the things on the phone, I've noticed how bubbly and it pops and it's smooth and it works and it's all like awesome. And I was like, this is what Apple users have been experiencing for years. I've finally caught up. And the hilarious part about that thought is every time I update my phone, I feel that way. So like I went back from like the Nexus 6P to a Pixel 1 to a Pixel 3 to now a Pixel 6 Pro. And every single time I make the jump, I have that thought of like, this is what Apple gets. And they get it so much faster and more consistently. And like the user experience was always front and center with Apple, way more than any of the other tech features. And that's what made Android more appealing to me, was because of tech features coming from like PC building backgrounds where I cared about the hertz and the RAM and being able to like install third-party stuff and like navigate the file system and back up my own files and like do all the tweaking and hacking and get in there. Right. That was always my appeal of Android, because Apple locked all that stuff out. People who use Apple mostly don't care about those things. Does the phone work? And so Apple put that user experience front and center. And every time I upgrade my Android phone, I feel like I've caught up to Apple again for a brief time. And anyway, I feel that way again. And I thought that was a really funny thought, the Apple Google war that happens. But
I don't have time
anyway,
to
what's
get
your favorite
super
thing?
far into my favorite thing. So I
Okay.
was listening to our episode from the roguelike episode. So it was the episode between Christmas and New Year's. So this is a few episodes late, but in that episode, I was listening to it because I was editing it. And in that episode, I mentioned that my favorite thing was something I couldn't talk about yet. So I'm finally talking about it like 2 episodes later.
Yeah.
And it was the gift exchange you did. That was fun.
Yes, it was a lot of fun.
If you haven't seen that yet, go check it out. I basically Russian nesting dolled his present in boxes within boxes within boxes.
Oh, I don't think I've uploaded that to Twitch or from Twitch yet. I gotta get on that.
All right, cool. Well, then that moves us to our final segment, which is DLC. DLC stands for downloadable content. It is a fun mini sub discussion, a conversation you wouldn't normally have about video games, potentially. Maybe you do. Maybe you have a really cool group of friends or really weird group of friends, depending on some of our DLCs. But yeah, tonight's DLC prompt I came up with in the vein of hype conversations. I want you to pick a hyped game that's coming out next year. So what is a game that you already are seeing lots of hype for that coming out next year? And I would discourage you from picking the one I think you're going to pick, but I can't really control what you're going to pick. So pick a game from next year that you think has a lot of hype around it already. And it could be a game that doesn't have a release date yet, but that is like the last release date we got was next year, right? 2022. So I guess it would be this year, right? So pick a game from this year, 2022, that's coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's supposed to come out, last we heard. So you got it?
Yep.
Okay, what's it?
Starfield.
Oh, thank God. I thought you were going to pick Elden Ring, and it would have actually been really hard.
I don't want to talk about a From Software game on the show anymore.
Thank you. I don't want to either at this point. Not that I have anything against it. We've been talking about it a lot thanks to me, and I'm like, yeah, I need a break from Elden Ring, so I was like begging you not to pick Elden Ring in my mind. Starfield, that's great. Perfect pick. Okay, so we're going to be talking about hype, and we're going to be talking specifically a lot about overhype in this episode. So what I want to do is a thought experiment here and think about how could Starfield, like what kind of state would it have to come out in? What kind of features would it have to not have? What kind of content cut or game design badness? Like how could Starfield bomb? How could Starfield end up being overhyped? Should it ultimately be a failure? Should it ultimately go the route of Cyberpunk, which we'll be bringing up a lot in this episode? What do you imagine? What would it look like if it bombed, I guess?
Ooh, well, I guess Starfield's a good pick because it's unique in that it just went through a little bit of a controversial transition from a multi-platform game to an Xbox game when Microsoft announced the acquisition of Bethesda.
I was going to say, I feel like Starfield would already be way more overhyped had not happened, right? Because now everybody
I don't know. Yeah, maybe it did put a wet blanket on there.
I do feel like it already did, but I'm not, but it still is a very hyped game. And I think that as its release gets closer, it's going to get even more, the hype's going to get driven up even more and more. So
yeah, and it also has the unique context of Bethesda coming out with a game in a similar genre, which was the Fallout series. Fallout 4 did wonderfully well, and then Fallout 76 was a big flop, which we'll talk about later. Mm-hmm. And so like that's the latest game that Bethesda has come out with in that open world vein is
oh my gosh, I can't
Fallout 76. So they're recovering from a huge flop and now acquired by Microsoft. So if Starfield flops, it would be a massive massive detriment to Bethesda,
to both Microsoft
to
and Bethesda,
Microsoft's
right?
all of Game Pass. What does Elden Ring 6 look like?
Bethesda doesn't just release games all the time, right? Like, I mean, they've got their like sub studios like id and them who do release games more frequently than, but like Bethesda, right? The big, I mean, Fallout 76 was the last one, and gosh, how many years ago was that? So it's you're right. I'm thinking that like number one, the whole like place. I feel like they could bring the hype back if they were like, PlayStation release coming out in 2024 or something like that, right? Like some 2 years on exclusivity on, that's a way they could reignite the hype. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about how could it be overhyped. I mean, I feel like it is such a good candidate because of how big and massive Bethesda games are, and therefore how long they take to develop. And all that like detail that we were talking about in your intro or whatever, your banter, like all that level of detail, like those games are known for that. So I feel like anything that would interfere with that. So I guess like Cyberpunk, right? Like you could make the Cyberpunk comparison here and say that like, maybe they're biting off more than they can chew. And what if they can't get it out in a good state? And Bethesda games are always going to have bugs on launch because they're so huge, right? But like, what if it's buggy? What if it doesn't look right? Like they didn't spec it right for the hardware, blah, blah, blah. They fortunately have the advantage of, being at the beginning of a new hardware generation cycle, right? But I think the game's cross-generational, right? So what if the PS4 versions and Xbox One versions still suck?
There is no
or suck version on the... Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Yep. If the Xbox One version or the low spec version, if it has hard time running on any of the hardware, it's going to be, brutal for something that is so highly anticipated, a Bethesda release. So
it's crazy. The Microsoft architecture and development framework that they've produced from the beginning of the next generation, which is Series X, I guess current generation, and Series S, they have built, as far as I know, every series level game has been made from the beginning, being able to support the original hardware as a limiting factor. So like do they have any truly exclusive next gen titles? I don't think they do. Everything I've seen, Forza Horizon 5, Halo Infinite being the latest two like AAA ones, are like playable on Xbox One. So I'm confident that Starfield will perform well because that's been their strategy ever since. But who knows?
No, this is all speculation. This entire DLC is meant to be speculation. Yeah, I mean, it could also, not live up to the hype with if the story's poorly written. It could not live up to the hype if they better pray that thing doesn't like brick consoles or anything like that, because those are the kinds of things that can just kill an overhyped dead on arrival. So cool, awesome. I do hope for the best, right? I want it to be a game that makes me want to get an Xbox or makes me want to upgrade my PC in order to play it. Yeah. So
me too.
Cool. All right. Awesome. Well, that's DLC. What are your games from next year that could imagine being flops under certain circumstances that would put them in the category of overhyped? What are just games in general you think are overhyped? Do you think Elden Ring is overhyped, and why? We want to hear those thoughts, because quite frankly, it is got a lot of hype right now for a lot of reasons. The first of which is one of the writers attached to it obviously is a major hype pull there. So we want to hear those thoughts on any game that you think is overhyped, and then we want to even more hear you make the additional speculation as to like what would it look like for it to flop, and therefore justify people's accusations of overhype. With those thoughts, you can share with us and more at the places Termite will tell you about right now.
You can talk about how Breath of the Wild 2's hype is completely underwhelming by going to 80bitpodsmash.com, 80bitpodsmash.com. That's our landing website where you can find links to all of our social media outlets, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit, as well as a Discord server in the show notes. You can find all of those links there. Join us in the communities. Leave us comments, thoughts, questions, ideas, concerns. Start your own thread. Jump in wherever you would like. You can also find our podcast across all of the different podcast platforms of your choice: Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. The RSS feed is available for you as well to throw into any third-party app of your choice. So please go check out 80bitpodsmash, 80bitpodsmash.com.
That's right. And really quickly, we don't do the news anymore, so we have no place to talk about this. I'm just going to say, did you see the fact, though, that the Breath of the Wild 2 hype is a little bit back this week because of the...
Good, what happened?
Oh, you didn't see the patents. Nintendo dropped some patents.
Ooh.
For some game mechanics, basically, is what it was. And remember how in the trailer you saw that, like, you could go through the rocks and like come out on the bottom. Everybody was thinking that would just be something you could do at specific points, right? Like there was like, oh, you're at this, there's like a green thing on the ground. You walk over to the green thing and you can go beneath it to see. No, you can do that anywhere. I guess maybe anywhere in the floating rocks, but like Nintendo patented a game mechanic that was like that allows you to sink through, rocks in the world or whatever and come out the other side upside down or whatever. I was like, what? There's another one that's like can stop time and then reverse an object, like stop an object's time and then reverse send it in the other direction. Damn. So they're pushing the mechanics forward in Breath of the Wild too, and everybody's like stoked because it's stuff they kind of showed off but haven't like showed off, and like you never know if something that's showed off in a trailer is like a one-time quick time event or whatever, right? Like in the game, or if it's like a core mechanic. So
good segue into our hype discussion.
Right, yeah. So speaking of hype, so we're talking about hype. Obviously, there's lots of things that we ourselves are hyped for, and the industry is hyped for, and just hype is a part of this industry. You can't like throw a rock in the gaming community anymore without hitting something that is like a hype discussion or a discussion about something being overhyped or a game that didn't live up to the hype, or games that did live up to the hype, or a game that people are currently hyped about. So let's start there because we keep using this H word. What is hype?
This is actually, I want to use a funny example because you talked about like you can't get anywhere near the industry without feeling or knowing about hype. And so I immediately thought of people's perception that are not in the gaming industry or don't really care or know. And I remember this experience. I was running on my parents' treadmill in the basement. And of course, me being totally into the gaming industry was watching a live stream of events that was, I think it was when Smash Bros. Ultimate was first announced. It was a huge, like, epic announcement. And I'm running and I'm listening to headphones and I'm like I'm in my zone. I completely forgot my place where I was and what was going on. I was also alone in the basement, but the door was open and they could definitely hear me. So I like audibly gasped and was like, whoa, no way, just like freaking out. And my parents have no clue. And my brother as well, T-Bone. You don't know. Well, maybe he did. He actually probably did know what I was watching, funnily enough. But like my parents, who are not in the gaming industry at all, have no clue what's going on down there. So I come up from the run and they're like, what was that all about? I was like, oh, yeah, they announced something at Nintendo. It's great. And I explained to them in a way that they would understand. Like, and just tried to, anyway, that's the game industry hype. That's it right there.
I mean, it's essentially, no, you're right. I mean, his very anecdotal way of explaining what hype is basically, if we could break it down, it's this idea that like things are presented in such a way in the video game industry that get people, that are designed to get people excited about them, and that's what we call hype. Essentially, hype boils down to one thing: expectations. Hype is expectations that are sort of thrust upon the community of gamers out there in order to get them excited about buying a game. Granted, there's my wife actually contributed to this episode, so
nice.
Thank Macy for the second question. I told her what we were talking about tonight, and she said, "Oh, you should talk about how there's a difference between hype and buzz." And that had not even crossed my mind. But yeah, there's a difference, right? So hype is something that where like the industry is sort of telling you need to be excited about this, right? They do things like big events or big reveals, or they let things like leaks and rumors kind of slip in order to generate hype and it's all about getting trending, right? Like, and getting people Googling your stuff and getting excited about it. And it is meant to generate word of mouth, people talking about it, right? But there's also buzz, and buzz happens on its own. And I think that's the difference she was trying to highlight. Whereas buzz is just sort of like natural grassroots word of mouth, something, it's kind of how Game of Thrones got popular when it first started out, right? Like, I mean, obviously HBO, big HBO, they were hyping it, so to speak, but like they were also unsure with Game of Thrones. It was a big fantasy epic, right? Like when people think big budget fantasy, they think Lord of the Rings, and here, like, they were trying to make this property from from 1994 or whatever into something different than Lord of the Rings and more along the lines of what HBO does, with lots of, naked people and gore that Lord of the Rings didn't have. And so they wasn't sure if it was going to be successful. So they weren't hyping it that much, but it generated its own buzz, right? I think that at this point in culture, buzz as a marketing term has sort of fallen out of the wayside. And I think people tend to use hype and buzz synonymously these days. But I still think the idea is different. Or like not different. I still think the idea is worth discussing because it does sort of like drawing that dichotomy. It's one of those things where it's like, for this episode, we are going to draw that dichotomy and then agree, I think, hopefully, to use the term hype for all of it.
Oh, yeah. because everything we're talking about is definitely hype.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
interestingly, like Buzz, to throw some video game like examples out there, I think of Minecraft and like Stardew Valley. But Minecraft,
yes, that's a good one.
both of those were like amazing games that ultimately got hyped, but started like they came out and there was no fanfare. There was no like this one person developed Stardew Valley on his own in a room. Like his whole life was wrecked for years. He almost lost everything: his house, his family, his relationship. Everything was falling apart because he was devoted so much to this game, and it just flopped out. Like it just limped out onto release day, and there may have been like a tiny super niche hype around it, but it really was the buzz that got it to what it is today.
I feel like
and
there's a lot of
Minecraft,
indie games
same
that
way.
do that.
Yeah,
in Minecraft too, but like
Yep.
I think of Valheim is a more recent example of a game that like I did not hear anything about. It was not advertised, it was not pushed, it was not marketed. It just one day it showed up. This is fascinating, by the way. I'm glad I actually saw this today. There's a subreddit called Data is Beautiful, and they basically make a bunch of like information graphics that are pulled from actual data, but they make them look interesting in order to make a point, right? And the one I saw today it was a map of the United States, and basically it went through the calendar days, and each day it showed what was the top trending item in each state. And what was fascinating to see is that like throughout the year, like pretty much all the states, like across the country, everyone was talking about the same things. There were a couple of times when one state or two were behind or were Googling a different thing, but for the most part, everybody's talking about the same thing all the time. And Valheim made it on the Google trending across the country for like a couple days in like August or something like that. It was fascinating. February, sorry. Yeah, so when it came out. So, I feel like that's another good example of a very recent example of a game that just was successful due to buzz more so than hype. But again, I do think that from here on out, we're probably going to use the terms interchangeably. So if we're talking about hype,
Outriders made it on there too in March.
Yeah,
neat.
I think that the two of us will probably just sort of use the terms interchangeably, because at the end of the day, we're talking about expectations. We're talking about this idea that like people get excited about games, and I think we're going to generally use the term hype and not distinguish it from buzz, just to make it simpler in this case. But we did want to kind of draw the distinction there from the get-go. But what we're talking about tonight are expectations. We're talking about this idea that whether it's fans and people just sort of like, oh, this is good, here's what your expectations should be, or this looks exciting, here's what the expectations are. And then, whether it's hype or whether it's that, or whether it's hype in the sense that like, oh, the industry is like trying to, like a marketing team is trying to get you excited about the game. Doesn't matter. We're all feeling the hype, right? It's hype overload.
Yep.
So that's kind of what we want to talk about tonight, and hopefully did not bore you with that explanation. Anything else you want to talk about with hype and its relationship?
I do. I want to highlight one thing about hype. You talked about how it boils down to expectation, but what really highlights hype is how drummed up it is. It's manufactured excitement. It's not. Sometimes it's valid, sometimes it's not. That's what we'll get into in the weeds here in a minute. But I just wanted to highlight the fact that like this is engineered by developers, publishers, journalists, influencers, gamers themselves. However, whatever side of the coin you want to look at it through, like hype is manufactured marketing almost around video games.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, if we are drawing the distinction between hype and buzz, then I would say yes, you are right, absolutely, about hype. If we're lumping them together and just sort of talking about it in general, then maybe not. I do think your argument still has merit in the sense that, like, at the end of the day, like, these are products. So whether they're indie developers or whether they're AAA, whether the publisher or developer is super confident in the hype they're generating or whether they're unsure.
Sometimes there's an expectation to drum up X amount of hype and they're not ready.
Yeah, well, yep. And
so they're like, we have to hype. Probably Cyberpunk, really.
Yeah,
in hindsight, like CD Projekt Red was like, none of this is going the way it's supposed to go.
No.
Nothing is ready at all, and they knew it, but they still had to meet. Yeah, Anthem as well. They have to generate example the hype.
Of like, they literally manufactured a trailer like the day before E3.
Yeah,
they literally made it, and it was one of the most hyped things that year. And they didn't even have a game. They didn't even have a game at that point. It was just a trailer. They like drummed up there the last second. So
you asked the question, like, what is the relationship to hype in video games? Well, the video game industry has like announcement beats throughout the year that allow opportunities for new games to be announced. So we have like E3s, Gamescoms, Tokyo Game Shows, PAX, all those big expos. They all the Game Awards. It was the newest one.
Yep.
Combine that with like needs for dev studios and publishers needing to manage their stock values and potentials for funding in the future, and they have to generate hype. It's their livelihood on the line. And then you have like the trailers don't always show reality, which we talked about, like teaser CGI versus gameplay, or like games that have just a logo. They're super early announced. We know we're not going to see them for 3 or 4 years, but there they are.
Ragnarok. Yep, that was God of War Ragnarok. Yep.
Exactly. And then that's like from the dev studio marketing perspective, but there's also this idea within the culture itself of like fanboys and girls who feel attached to game companies after learning like their pedigree and having experience after experience with them. They line themselves up and almost fight for them and like go to battle. This is something very, I think, unique to the gaming industry. Maybe in the movie and book comic industry, as a creative industry in general, there's probably a little bit of this, but it doesn't brush up to the mainstream like it does in the gaming industry.
Well, tech. There are, Apple fanboys and Apple fangirls.
Yeah, and AMD versus NVIDIA, and PC like versus Apple.
I think it's in a lot of like tech and entertainment for sure, but and cars. This kind of thing happens. Yeah, this kind of thing happens, I think, across the board. People like to attach themselves to brands, and then, Lord, it happens in politics too, man. Like people attach themselves. This is a human nature thing, right? We don't like to be confronted with our failures in general. We don't like to perceive ourselves as people who can make mistakes, especially in this culture. Something about our culture teaches us like, oh, you can't make a mistake. You can't, or else you'll be ashamed. And shame is the absolute most important emotion to avoid at all times. And so people just do these like mental gymnastics. There's a logical fallacy related to it, but basically it's like you have to in your mind be like, no, this was a good choice. This is actually a good thing. And there's no way my brain can do wrong. I actually find that the video game industry is quite quick to recognize when a developer has done wrong, and the like simps, I think that is what the term people would use. Like, I mean, the industry has turned wholeheartedly on CD Projekt Red since Cyberpunk. And I'm sorry, guys, Cyberpunk's going to come up a lot in this episode just because it's such a quintessential example and so recent. But people turned on them so faster than I would have expected based on like just the loyalty to that brand. And just people talk about that all the time. CD Projekt Red, The Witcher was so amazing. They can do no wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that whenever we get into that trap with any developer, then we are setting ourselves up for, again, it's all expectations, right? And anytime you have expectations going into something, those expectations are either going to be met or they're not. And you have to be ready for when they're not. I love From Software. And I think they're going to make a great game with Elden Ring. But I will be hopefully the first person to admit that game could flop. Any game could flop at any time, no matter the pedigree of the developer, period.
Yeah.
Throwing that out there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm playing Mass Effect right now, and they're amazing games. Incredible, phenomenal games. And I just see how BioWare has fallen. And I just get sad. We were just talking about how, like, the winners of the Game Awards for the first couple of years, it was what? Dragon Age Inquisition in 2014. Yep. And then was it The Witcher in 2015? And then Overwatch in 2016. CD Projekt Red, BioWare, and Blizzard, the first 3 years of the Game Awards, every single one of them have fallen from grace now.
Yep.
It's just like, oh, clutch your pearls, ladies and gentlemen, because it's like, please, Nintendo, don't fail us like those companies have. Please, Santa Monica Studios, please, Naughty Dog, please, Insomniac, please, Hazel Light, right? Like, all these companies that have won Game of the Year. I guess not Insomniac. They got snubbed today.
Yeah.
Whatever. You know what I mean, though? Like,
they'll get there.
Right.
Wolverine looks good.
Just because a game wins Game of the Year does not, or just because a company a developer makes a game that wins Game of the Year and deserves all the accolades that it receives, does not mean that they are immune to making mistakes and they're immune to corruption over time, degradation. So
before half our audience stops their cars and deletes 80-bit Pod Smash entirely from their service subscriptions and think that Termite is a shill and a complete hypocrite, the Wolverine is coming comment I just made about Insomniac was totally a joke about this entire episode, because all we got from them was CGI and we have no clue what that game is at all. And I was like, hold your breath for Insomniac to win Game of the Year because Wolverine's going to win. Like, that's exactly what we're talking about.
It's going to be like a Candy Crush
calm
clone.
down, folks.
It's just going to be Wolverine clawing candy.
That would be horrible. I would cry.
Race to the bottom, let's move ladies and gentlemen. Yep. All right, cool. I don't know if we have time to cover like the full history of hype in the video game industry.
We'll give some examples.
Interesting as that would be, I think that would be fun to give some examples. So let's give some examples of games that lived up to the hype, because that's a what we haven't talked about here is the possibility of like sometimes the hype is deserved.
It's valid enough to keep it a thing.
Yeah.
Like it is a thing for a reason. It's because it does work.
Yeah, for sure. So sometimes the hype is lived up to. So let's talk about some examples of that to get people on the positive note, and then we'll talk about examples of games that were overhyped to the point of not meeting those expectations. Really quick, because I don't see it on your list, and I'm disappointed in you because we just talked about this a couple weeks ago. You missed Halo 2. Holy crap, if you're talking about games that had
what's funny, though?
Much hype to it.
It did. And the reason why I didn't hype. I actually I did think about Halo 2, and I did not put it on this list because they initially had showed off a trailer at E3 that was better than they could hope to imagine. And they had to completely redo it and change it. And there's videos online now to do the comparison of what launched versus what was presented, and it was not the same. Which to me felt like,
I like looking at your list here. I can already pick out at least one game on there that has the same exact problem: The Witcher 3. The original CGI, the original trailer of The Witcher 3 looked it looked like something from PS5 generation. Like maybe I'm imagining it and conflating it in my head. It definitely had a downgrade in.
Interesting, did it?
Yeah, it did. But I don't care, man. Like there was so much hype around Halo 2, and Halo 2 is, we talked about it, it's like the best of the Halos in my opinion. So,
yeah, it's awesome. It's my favorite Halo. Yeah.
So,
but that's why I didn't add it to my hype list. But I'm not going to list my entire here. I'll just highlight like a generation at a time or something. But Mario 64 to me was insane. Like the hype leading up to Mario 64, the jump to 3D for the first time.
I was a kid, so
you were way too young. But it was the hype was palpable. It was insane. It was there was demo stations set up at like everywhere. If there's 2 demo stations in Fredericksburg for a Nintendo game back in the 90s, it's a big deal because no one in Fredericksburg gave a crap about video games, at least at the grand scheme. It's like you go to Walmart, they have no clue what you're talking about. But there was 2. There was one in like Sears and one in Best Buy that were just playing Mario 64. And Best Buy had a 9x9 TV screen grid set up with an N64 hooked up to it to play Mario 64. It was insane. And it met every expectation. Go anywhere you want to go. Amazing. Do anything you want to do. First time ever in the history of games. It was amazing. At a console level, like widespread, like Mario. I'm sure there was a ton of PC games that were doing this before Mario 64. But yeah, hype. The next one is Half-Life 2. Of course, like Half-Life 1 was such a success with all of its mods. Like the sequel coming out, Valve finally like doing the source engine and all the upgrades to Steam and everything else behind it in the back end. Like it totally met hype. It was wonderful and it explored new boundaries for physics in ways that were never done before. So it met all of its hype. And then I'll say Breath of the Wild as like a more modern example, because I also have Horizon Zero Dawn and God of War on here. Those are more modern ones, but Breath of the Wild was super hyped up.
I don't think HDD was as hyped as it could have been.
Yeah, I think Guerrilla was like catered, and we'll go into why afterwards with the games that didn't meet their hype. But yeah, I think Guerrilla Games definitely reined it in.
Well, Horizon Forbidden West, I feel like has been more hyped because
it has been.
HDD proved it, like Zero Dawn proved itself.
Yep.
So, because I didn't even know about Horizon Zero Dawn until like the week it released, and even then, it was just like, okay, this is. Sorry, weird game about like Indian girl. And then there was the controversy where they used the term braves or whatever, and the Native American community, probably rightly. At the time, I dismissed it, but in hindsight, I'm like, yeah. I mean, the Native American community has a right to determine what they're offended by, I guess. So, anyways, I just derailed myself.
Guerrilla Games hype.
It doesn't matter. It came out so close to Breath of the Wild was the problem, right?
Yeah,
and it was
exactly.
it was overshadowed. So whatever hype may have been generated around it, it just didn't feel like something that I really cared about until later when I was like, oh wow, this game actually looks really good, and reviews on it were really good, and then I tried it and I was like, this is amazing. So yeah, that was one that I feel like was actually not as well hyped as it could. If we're just talking about games that are hyped up, that are like, oh, this is conversation, everyone's talking about it, everyone's excited for it, and it either sucks like Cyberpunk or is amazing like Breath of the Wild, that's kind of what I don't feel like actually Horizon lives up to that as much as some of your other. I mean, Portal, you got on this list, you got Portal 2, Half-Life 2, like, oh my gosh. And on your other list, you've got games that don't live up to the hype. So I want to talk about some of those.
Hold on, before we transition, there's one other category that we didn't highlight here. I have one example because I don't want to get into it. It takes too long. Okay. But a game that was hyped that no one bought into, everyone's disappointed, the hype is failing, it comes out and it's freaking amazing. Which I don't know what that would fit into, because like, did it live up to its hype? Yeah, I do.
Okay.
It's Wind Waker. So when Zelda Wind Waker was first shown off, like it was supposed to be hype. It was marketed as a hyped up thing. So from the developer perspective, like Nintendo, they did everything they could to hype up Wind Waker. They did all the promotional stuff, but no one was buying. Like everyone was disappointed in the new graphic style. And then it came out and it was absolutely incredible, which I guess lived up to its hype. but it was weird in that the culture around the gaming industry at the time, they didn't buy it.
Accepted. It wasn't accepted.
Right. It wasn't an accepted hype. Yeah. I don't, it's a weird subcategory to live up to hype. And I wanted to highlight that as a thing that happens sometimes. And we can move on now. So stuff that didn't live up.
I'll think of another example. I think, and I wasn't super involved in the From Software community at the time, so I don't know exactly how they received it. But my understanding is a lot of people were disappointed when Sekiro came out. Or when Sekiro was announced, because they were hoping From Software would be working on something different, as opposed to just like we've, again, at that point we'd seen Shinobi Samurai games aplenty, and they were hoping they would do something different. And I mean, obviously it won Game of the Year 2019, so it lived up to its hype. It lived up to the intended hype, I guess. So, all right, cool. All right, let's talk about games that did not live up to the hype. So obviously Cyberpunk.
Yeah, that's the biggest news.
I'm going to steal some of yours here. Anthem obviously is one that did. I mean, just again, and I in hindsight, I'm like, man, I feel like we all should have seen the writing on the wall with Anthem, but it was BioWare, and the concept looked so cool, and the game was beautiful. Like, I mean,
and EA has infinite money. What could go wrong?
Exactly. Yeah, people there was like this weird feeling of like I saw from the gaming industry both that like widespread skepticism you were talking about, and also the widespread hype. And I felt very confused when Anthem came out, and I was like, I'll play it first. Then they did the demo, and the demo was fun. I was like, all right, it's got its problems, it's got its issues, but like whatever. Hopefully they'll fix those before launch. No, they didn't, and then they proceeded to not fix any issues with the game until it was basically canceled. So, yeah, that's one. And I also want to point out No Man's Sky. Oh, my gosh. Talk about No Man's Lie is what the community ended up calling it for a long time. And awful. Honestly, it's a great redemption story because it's doing well now, but it doesn't change the fact that the game was hyped. I mean, they were basically talking about how they had this, like, incredible, almost like AI level procedural generation where you would have like infinite planets to explore, and every single one of them would be a unique and different adventure, and nobody would have the same experience in the game. And it was crap. It was garbage. I mean, it was like almost like the planets were almost all identical. It was ridiculous, and it was kind of the big failing of that game. So, yeah, cool. You want to talk about some of your other picks here?
I do want to again just revisit like Fallout 76. Everyone had hyped up Fallout because of its pedigree and Bethesda and how awesome they were.
Fallout? Oh my gosh.
Lose your minds. But personally, I was really, really bummed. And we'll get into what we do as individuals when we deal with hype and how we react to it and what we do to buy in, et cetera, et cetera. But Battlefield 2042.
Or to avoid it.
Exactly. Yeah. Battlefield 2042 and Back 4 Blood were both big disappointments for me. So they didn't live up to their hype at all. And that could have been more of a personal hype given what they are and how they were announced and stuff. I was really hyped up about those two games, and they didn't, and Marvel's Avengers, like when it was first teased from Crystal Dynamics, Square Enix, what could go wrong? This is going to be absolutely incredible. And it was kind of like, what's the Valley term you use for like something that should...
Uncanny Valley.
Uncanny Valley. It is the epitome of Uncanny Valley when it comes to Avengers. It's like, this has the look and feel of something that can be incredible, but there's something that's not right.
That just doesn't
and it's not super fun to play, and it's kind of shallow, and like there's a whole bunch of problems with it. And then it's been limping to recovery ever since, and it's still kind of getting better. But yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, but at that point, I mean, the whole point about it, I mean, we'll get to kind of the cons, but like the whole point is that by that point, like even No Man's Sky, there are still people out there that will not buy it just because of how poorly it launched. And you can talk to them about how much better it got. You can talk to them about how it's improved over time and how this patch really turned it around. It doesn't matter. Like it does, and that's the problem with hype, right? Is that it doesn't matter if it fails to meet expectations. Like the taste in people's mouths is sometimes hard to get past when that failure happens. Really quickly, I did want to add one to your did meet expectations list, but talk about game that I was hyped about that just conversations and literally showed up on the Twitter feed for the better part of a year. Smash Bros. Ultimate. Like talk about hype. I mean, that game had hype for all the DLC characters that came out afterwards for almost like 3 years.
Every single release of a new character was just a whole new hype cycle. It was like hype cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I know the Smash character is going to come out. Let's talk about how exciting it'll be. And some of those characters lived up to the hype. The vast majority of them have been kind of like, come on, Nintendo. But the game itself, still, the whole everyone is here. Like, talk about one of the biggest hypes of the last decade. Like if you're talking about like what are the single most hyped trailers of any game over the last decade, Smash Ultimate deserves to be on that list because everyone is here was one of the greatest, like, 3-lined hype phrases of all time, because it was just like, yes! Oh, man. I'm smiling.
Wonderful.
I'm getting butterflies, feel how excited I was.
It was so good.
What was that,
so
2019? At the beginning of 2019, end of 2018?
At E3 in 2018.
Yes, E3 in 2018 was the Everyone Is Here trailer, yes. And the game came out in 2018 as well. So, incredible.
Yeah, later that year.
All right, let's move on to our next question real quick, because we're running. We'll combine these 2 questions into one. Actually, we'll combine these 3 questions into one. How is hype beneficial and sought after in the gaming industry? Why is hype damaging to the gaming industry? And what is your final verdict? Is it more damaging than it is beneficial? So yes, answer all those questions. I'm going to start and just simply say that it's beneficial for the most important reason it's beneficial is sales. Almighty dollar. Yep. We're capitalists after all, ladies and gentlemen. We just had an episode on this back on Christmas. So you can hear more of our thoughts on capitalism and how it relates to gaming in that episode. But again, at the end of the day, like, the reason hype is beneficial is because holy crap do people buy games, even the bad ones. There's a reason why Call of Duty continues to sell millions of copies. There's a reason why Grand Theft Auto 5 is the best-selling single entry of a game of all time, is because those games are always hyped. Those games, some of them live up to the hype, and that just drives sales even further. And it's just it's super profitable. And then more so even with new games, brand new. I mean, Horizon Zero Dawn, like, we discussed how it may or may not have been hyped well, but it was still a hyped game, and it generated a lot of that grassroots buzz as well once it came out. And that ultimately meant that it got franchised. So games that do live up to the hype, they get franchised. Cyberpunk 2077, probably not going to be a franchise.
Yep.
They're going to go back to the last super hyped game that lived up to those expectations, and that's Witcher. And CD Projekt Red is probably going to be a Witcher company for a while now. Because The Witcher lived up to the hype and Cyberpunk did not. So yeah, those are the benefits, is that games, this ultimately, though, again, it's easy to be cynical and be like, okay, great, it only benefits the publisher. But like, at the end of the day, we talked about this before. If games do well and succeed, if games live up to their hype and make money, it means that you're going to get more of what you love from that developer, hopefully. Obviously, as we just discussed, any developer is subject to failure, but like, more money, more resources, more attention means that like a developer that does well gets to make more games. I think of like Supermassive. Is it Supermassive or Supergiant? I get the two confused all the time.
Those are 2 valid game companies.
Hades, the developer of Hades.
It's Supergiant.
Is it Giant? Okay, great.
Yep.
So Supergiant, like, they continue to get like games. They continue to make good quality games that are like Game of the Year contenders because their games do well and there's lots of hype around. They're a good example of an indie developer who has like done well for themselves and whose games are hyped just because of how well they've done.
Yes.
And they get to keep making great games because their games lived up to the hype that they were able to generate for them. So,
and they started small, much like Minecraft did, or like Stardew Valley, where it's like Supergiant games didn't really mean much to folks back when Transistor and Pyre and Bastion were like being released, but now Hades hit and it was like Game of the Year nominated. Oh crap! So the next Supergiant games is gonna have some hype. So like that's
for sure. It's a compounding effect. Yep.
Yeah, that's the snowball. Yeah, and you're right. It's all like it's funny that you mentioned the capitalist angle because that's usually like my thing on the show, but you did it this time. So I'm going to talk about how is hype sought after? Like, what is it? How is it beneficial? It's culturally beneficial. The mutual subject matter of like video games that we collectively as a community.
Oh yeah,
you get excited about it together.
Right, and the fact like the idea of like trending things on Twitter is only because like it means that people are conversing about it. And a great example of this is the Grinch Leak for Smash.
It was insane.
Totally a huge, crazy moment of overhype. Like, holy crap, talk about overhype and talk about fan expectations going off the rails. The Grinch Leak is probably one of my favorite examples of this. Why? Because I bought into it. I was part of it. It was a mistake of mine, but I was 100% convinced, man. I was like, you're an idiot because you don't believe this. Because you're exercising rational and reasonable caution when it comes to things like leaks and rumors, and here I am being like, you're such a sheep. And now I have egg on my face and it's completely changed the way that I interact with hype and expectations completely. That was like I was like, this is the last time I get caught with egg on my face. It won't be the last time. It's But anyways,
well, I'm glad you learned and that you grew from that.
But it doesn't change the fact that like the community was so excited about it and people talking about it.
Lost their minds.
You feel when people get excited about things like that, even if it's overhyped. There's so, like I said, it's this galvanizing effect. People get to share an experience together, and even if that experience is we're all falling for something stupid,
right?
That someone on the internet made up. It doesn't change the fact that people get. I mean, the Bloodborne thing too. Recently, people were just like there were conversations. Everyone was discussing the merits and how like valid it might be that like a Bloodborne remaster by Blue Point may be announced at the Game Awards. It wasn't. It's fine. Mm-hmm. We're all over it now.
But the source of that leak, or at least that hype, was Colin Moriarty, who talks to people that are in the industry, and knows that something is happening. We just haven't found out. So it was like a gap. Like the industry, the community's made a jump, an assumption that Colin's confirmation that someone is working from Blue Point on Bloodborne was going to be at the Game Awards. Well, the false part is that it's going to be at the Game Awards. So we still don't know, or it's not disproven that that's not going to happen. But that's an example of the community like getting together. And we will talk about how that is problematic sometimes, but to me, that's still like, I didn't buy into the Grinch thing. It got annoying, not from you specifically. Your hype, when you were talking about it, that's when it was the most fun for me to engage in it, but it continued on. Yeah, it got to the point where like, okay, I'm done hearing about this now. It's not super valid, and then it got disproven, and it was great. But
then that you got to be vindicated for sure,
right? It was like, okay, this wasn't going to happen. But I still would look back on that and say, I would never want to get rid of that. I would never want to throw a wet blanket on it. Like that was so fun.
In time. Yeah,
it's just so cool. Suddenly, you don't care who's president anymore. You don't care what this school system is doing. Like you're so excited, and like it does bring people together in a weird kind of like mutual interest in a subject matter together, and that to me is valuable.
Sure, and even when it turns sour, I mean, when it gets to toxic and death threats, it's a problem. But like, I'm not gonna lie, it was fun to join the internet and hating on Cyberpunk 2077 when it came out. It was fun to watch and laugh at the videos of how terrible it looked on the PS4 and Xbox One. It was fun to laugh at the silly, ridiculous animations and things like Assassin's Creed.
Unity,
where it's the crazy eyeballs. Yeah, like that. Yep. Like that. Like that is a fun thing to laugh at and enjoy as a community. The facial animations in Mass Effect Andromeda. Like, it's sometimes fun to just kind of like, it's fun to watch. It's Schadenfreude, right? Like the Schadenfreude is a German word that means happiness at the misfortune of others. It's like sometimes when you've got companies that do get all this hype and all this buzz, and people talk about how they can do no wrong and how they are going to just always be the best at what they do. Sometimes it's fun to watch them get knocked down a peg. And I don't think that's necessary. I mean, when it turns toxic, when it turns death ready, then yes, it's a bad thing. 100%, and it needs to stop, and we need to defend the people who are just trying to make something for people to love and due to circumstances could not get it out the gate. But if you have a healthy approach to it, if you're just like, you know what, like, hey, everybody makes mistakes, every company is subject to having a failure every once in a while, and if we allow for that as a community, then it can be fun to dunk on their failures, a little bit, you know what I mean? It's good old, as long as it stays in that realm of good-natured ribbing in the way that you would like pick on a friend for tripping and falling and landing in the mud and getting their nice clothes all dirty after they were like showing off there. You know what I mean? Like there's that shot of, oh, I got this look at my new shoes. They're so awesome. And they step in a mud puddle and you're like, oh yeah, great looking shoes there, buddy. As long as it stays in that level and not to like the fact of like, you should feel like the worst person ever for spending money on those shoes only to step in mud. Gosh, you're just a complete failure and a horrible person. It should kill you. Like once you get into that mentality, then it's like, okay, put the brakes on it. Now you're just being needlessly cruel. So there's a balancing line to walk, but I do think as long as it can stay in that like good-natured ribbing, it could be a very fun galvanizing, beneficial culturally, community-wise, to sort of all kind of come together and be like, 343. Maybe you shouldn't be so predatory with your microtransactions in your otherwise exceptional game. And then I'll laugh at like the battle passes, like the rewards that we get and screenshot them and say, oh, look, premium battle pass required. Thanks for wasting my last hour of my life, 343.
Well, interestingly, you used 343 as an example because they showed Halo Infinite off as a giant hype trailer that landed flat as a release title and then went back to the drawing board and like used that hype. And that's a good example of how like hype is beneficial because of the attention that it got and how, even though it was negative attention, it was still attention. the 343 went back to the drawing board and said, okay, you know what? We're going to delay this a year. We're going to line up with Halo's 20th anniversary instead of the Series X launch, and we're going to reapproach this, and we're going to listen to our fans. And there was other, like the PlayStation, like Sony turning around the decision to shut down the PS3 and PS Vita stores because of the hype around the negative hype about that decision. And it's like, no, we still have a voice here. We want these stores open. We still have people here to use them. So like, let's keep it going. Sony did turn that corner. And like, now we see, maybe, I hope, Nintendo is answering to the negative press about the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack, the N64 emulator, and how sub performance that it is, and like it's disappointing to folks. So I'm hoping like those types of hype is beneficial to the industry, because it does hold the bigger people at play to accountability, holds them accountable, and allows them to answer to the community, and it kind of helps, like, makes people feel like they've got a voice or a stake in this thing. Yeah, it's really cool.
Feedback. The one interesting thing about the current state of the gaming industry is, like, in the 90s and the early 2000s, you didn't have that instant, immediate feedback. You know, your game had to kind of launch and either succeed or fail, and then people comment on it and write articles in magazines that people would get a month or two after the game had already come out, right? Like, it was bad gas traveled a lot slower back in those days. Now, bad gas, I mean, you go trending on Twitter and it's like, whoo, so that can be both developers who can learn to use that to their advantage and use that almost instantaneous feedback to then improve their games. Those are the ones that are going to succeed in the next decade or two.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, definitely.
Let's talk about how it's damaging, though. I think that, we talked about how it's ultimately expectations, and there are kind of two aspects to this where, on the one hand, expectations that are not met can be extremely, this was my comment, that they can be extremely they can be deadly to a studio, right? Like BioWare better bring it with Dragon Age 4, because if they don't, they're probably on the chopping block. I imagine that the Mass Effect 5 or whatever, Mass Effect 4, I think they're officially
calling it 4, yeah.
Whether or not Mass Effect 4 will succeed, or sorry, no, not even that. Whether or not Mass Effect 4 will be developed by BioWare at all will depend on how well Dragon Age 4 does. Because if Dragon Age 4 flops, then I fully believe EA will shut down BioWare and take all their properties and put them in the hands of different developers. So if if Dragon Age 4 flops, I fully believe that we may get a Mass Effect game designed by Respawn. So what I'm trying to get at here is just simply it can be a studio killer. And we've already seen it. I mean, we've already seen how, when was the last, really well-received game that Blizzard released? It was Shadowlands, and even then, since it's come out, it's gotten just an extreme amount of criticism.
So Shadowlands after Overwatch?
It was, but Shadowlands was extremely well received when it first came out, but then as Blizzard failed to, once again, meet expectations and meet hype in the storytelling, in the game design, in the content cadence of releases, the game began to be heavily criticized, and at this point, the community absolutely hates. Even the World of Warcraft community hates Shadowlands. So, Blizzard has not had a mega hit in years now, since Overwatch. Right. And even Overwatch is super controversial now, too. So it's like, ugh.
Yep.
I mean, Blizzard should be shaking in their boots right now. Activision could very easily shut them down or absorb them at any point they want. So, anyways, I'm just saying that, it can be a killer. But you mentioned the other side of unmet expectations, and that is how development studios that know or begin to get a sense of how their game is not going to live up to the expectations will or can predatize that. The good example is Halo, right? Halo was this is not living up to expectations. We need to just delay things and stop and cut content in order to get it to the point where it will meet expectations. But the other side of that, Cyberpunk 2077, the whole obfuscation, not giving, PS4 and Xbox One codes or any console codes at all to reviewers, journalists. They knew what they were going to come out the gate with. They knew it was going to be a failure. They obfuscated, they deflected, they abused things like embargoes, review embargoes and stuff like that. They just did everything predatory they possibly could to just get to that date. And then the rest is history. Now they are a meme basically for unfinished bad products that were overhyped.
Yeah. And the hype is also wielded by all of the developers and publishers and stuff, regardless of whether their game's actually something or not, but through things like pre-order predatory practices, which we talked about in one of our microtransaction episodes.
How many people pre-ordered Cyberpunk?
Right, I know I did.
Millions. I did. Hell yeah, this is another one that I fell for. Right, like I did
Me too. I was really into that game.
I did. I trusted CD Projekt Red, and I shouldn't have. It should have been a huge red flag that and journalists said days leading up to Cyberpunk's release date, hey, we didn't get console codes, and that's a little weird. That's a little fishy. It should have been a deal breaker. Honestly, games journalism failed. It should have been a deal breaker. It should have been like, nope, we're not going to review your game at all, and we're going to simply release an article saying we couldn't review this because they would not provide us with the codes, and that's a huge red flag. Nobody should buy this game. Literally is what the entire games journalism industry should have responded to Cyberpunk with. Might have actually made a difference. Now, sorry. Side rant. You were talking about pre-orders.
Yeah, so I was thinking about other predatory practices. Now it's not just pre-orders. It's like the console exclusivity windows and blocking. It's like PlayStation people can get this early. Like Final Fantasy VII Remake was a PS5 exclusive, PS4 exclusive for a year, and then like Tomb Raider,
finally came to Epic Games and was full of bugs. Full of bugs on release, like on the PC port. Yep.
So that's ironic.
Bad press for Final Fantasy Remake recently.
It is, but like. All of that has to go into like the hype machine, and like generating hype is now something that's expected of everyone. So like, there's this like snowball of an incentivization to continue driving hype for capitalist reasons. It's all capitalism to draw the attention away,
which kills the fun. It really kills the fun when you just look at it as a machine to drive profits.
Yep, that's what it is.
Everything that we just talked about in the, the beneficial category of how like it galvanizes people and bonds people, like a lot of that just feels like the rug gets pulled out from under you when you look at it from terms of like, oh, great. I'm so excited for, Disney to drive this Star Wars property into the ground. And that's a TV show. That's a movie TV show example, but it doesn't change the fact that it's like, okay, so Disney's now there's a rumor that Disney is going to be rebooting Firefly. And I groaned.
I was excited. That's hilarious.
Because I groaned only because I've been very disillusioned recently with Marvel, and I've been very disillusioned with Star Wars. And I just don't see Disney as a company anymore that does anything but drive franchises into the ground, like Activision, right? Like I can't help but draw the parallel between Disney and Activision of like release, whether it's good or not, whether it's quality or not, whether it's actually beneficial to our long-term goals or long-term quality or not, just go. And they've done that with Star Wars. They've done that with Marvel. And I'm like, don't do it with Firefly. Please let it remain pure. Cool. Awesome. And then I do want to really quickly finally hit on your last point of toxicity, right?
Yeah.
Hype can result in this toxicity in the community, whether it's when it turns sour, like again, sometimes it's like, oh, this game didn't live up to my expectations, so I'm going to start sending death threats, and review bombs can get particularly nasty sometimes, and the community can be really, really toxic. Just look at go to like the Anthem subreddit, the whole like low sodium movement. I don't know if you know what low sodium Reddits are. Mm-hmm. It's basically saying that like the salt, it's low on salt. And basically it's like there's low sodium Anthem and low sodium. Anytime a community turns toxic because a game doesn't live up to expectations, there's inevitably going to be a low sodium version of that Reddit. And it's meant to be like, this is positive. This is positive stuff.
Yeah.
But, again, it just goes to show that like sometimes the community turns so toxic that it drives people to like form their own communities who are enjoying the content. Maybe they did enjoy Anthem. And so, the community, it can just get like, people can get really cruel to one another. And all of that's expectations. And all of that is, quite frankly, stupid. I'm sorry. If you feel the need to be cruel, we have always taken the stance on 8-Bit Pod Smash, and I will continue it. If you feel the need to say something cruel to someone because you didn't like something, because something didn't live up to your expectations, that's your problem. Get over it and act like a grown adult. I'm sorry. I don't care if you're a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, an 8-year-old. You cannot act like that on the internet towards people or in real life towards people. Grow up and deal with your own emotions and deal with your own circumstances, because that is how we are to interact with one another in a society. So whether if you feel the instinct to send a death threat to a developer or to someone on Reddit that actually likes the thing that you hate, get over it, go outside, drink a glass of water, Go take a nap. I don't care what it is you need to do to calm yourself down. Do it, because you're acting like a monster and you deserve no sympathy when you choose to make that choice. So,
and the people you talk to online are real people.
Yes.
These are really actual full blood skin people that have families, loved ones, kids.
Yeah, I don't
whatever.
care if it's a developer who made the game you hate the most. I don't care if it's
don't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if that person, made really good arguments that you had a hard time refuting about why a game is good that you hate. Get over it and don't be an a-hole. Just, if you cannot say something nice, don't say something at all. This is what the advice my parents gave me. But more importantly, if you cannot refute an argument with logic and facts, do not turn to petty or cruel statements, attacks. So,
and to take that thought to the meta of this topic alone, hype in and of itself also generates this toxicity where it's like a game gets announced and there's two sides of the fence of this is not as good as it seems, and then there's the fanboys and girls who are like, this is going to be absolutely incredible, and then they hate each other for it. And like,
both
this is ridiculous.
Sides have the capacity for terrible behavior.
If you're hyped about Starfield and I'm not, I have no right to tell someone not to be hyped about Starfield. Go be hyped.
Not just that.
Do you.
Well, I mean, I would say you are in your right to make logical arguments as to why you think it's not going to live up to the hype.
Right.
And they have every right to make logical. We just had this. We've been having this discussion about Elden Ring for months now. Mm-hmm. And we have kept it in the vein of being like, hey, let's break it down logically. And we've had a wonderful, enlightening debate about this, healthy debate between the two of us. But it could have easily just turned toxic if we had been less. And we're not trying to toot our own horns, guys. But yes, there is a certain
we are
level
examples of what we're saying. It's actually like, it's not about tooting our own horns or patting ourselves on the back. It's like, if we're going to make a statement and call our communities to like be better to each other,
right?
What better way to show that by like exemplifying that in our own lives and in our own interactions. If you ever see us doing any of this crap, you have every right to call us out and call us hypocrites.
Yep, absolutely. And you know what? We've done 225 episodes of this. Mainline episodes of this, we've probably made mistakes in that vein along the way, so we apologize if we ever made anybody feel like that.
We're pretty good.
So
I don't know about,
I hope so.
I don't know about mistakes.
I hope so. I'm sure we have. I know myself. Okay, I won't even speak for you. I'll just say I know I've probably made careless statements on the podcast before, and for that I apologize if I made anybody feel dumb or lesser or whatever. But all right, cool. Hype. Wow. Final verdict. Yes or no question. Hype. Good or bad?
Good
for the industry. Good. Okay.
Yep.
I'm gonna say bad only because I've seen too many examples of it go wrong. So,
people ruin everything fun, right?
They really did, and I just went off on a huge rant where I basically told people to grow a pair and get over themselves, and that's how strongly I feel about how hype. I'm just like, can we just go back to a time when, like, I don't even know. There's maybe not even a time. Obviously,
go back to a time when E3 was in person.
Let's go back into a time
super awesome
when there
and hype.
Was. Yeah, let's just go back to a time when there was no games at all. Let's just go back to like a time when people, I don't know, hunted for sport or whatever. That's a controversial statement too. PETA's gonna come after me. Dang it! I got PETA on us. We're gonna get red paint all over our nice fur clothing now. Termite.
Yuck.
We want to hear your thoughts on hype. Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? What are some of your favorite examples of games that lived up to the hype, and what are your favorite examples of games that did not live up to the hype? Do you think this entire conversation is blown out of proportion? We want to hear those thoughts and more. Termite, recap real quick where they can share those episodes with us, and then I'll share what our next episode is.
I want to hear y'all's favorite memories of plugging into a video game hype moment and you felt like you were part of something that was awesome and you had an unforgettable experience. I want to hear about that. And you can do that by going to 80bitpodsmash.com. It's our landing website where we have links to all of our social media outlets, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, and we have a Discord server in the link in all of our show notes. So go there and tell me what video game hype moment did you buy into and just feel absolutely incredible about it? And I don't have time to explain mine.
What was the outcome? What was the outcome?
And what was the outcome? Yeah, how did that?
Yep.
Exactly. Yep. And did you make any new friends? That would have been sweet. And also, if you're listening to us on some platform and you would like to know where else we are, we have weekly episodes that drop midnight on Monday mornings every single week. And you can find links to all of our podcast platforms at 80bit Podsmash, Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, etc. All at 80bitpodsmash.com.
Sweet. All right, next week we're going to be talking about the multiplayer magic number, and I'm just going to leave it at that. We'll leave it at the multiplayer magic number and let you talking about in an episode that'll air on January 17th. Talk to you then.
See you next week.